Hello and welcome to study session number 31 of Daily Memory Lab. In today's study session, we will read round 5 of Supply Under GST chapter, page number 32 to 42, and then we will read Charge of GST, page 14 to 18, round 4, page 56 to 59 of Charge of GST, same chapter, round 3, and then whatever we read yesterday, place of supply 4.8 to 4.16, and then after that we will read whatever the new count of pages that we are going to read today. So we'll set the study session intention. Now I am going to study for 30 to 60 minutes with full focus. In this study session, I lower down all my expectations and embrace imperfection. I may or may not get big breakthroughs in this study session, and I'm totally okay with it. I may or may not get big breakthroughs in this study session, and I'm totally okay with it. I will most likely make mistakes in the next 30 to 60 minutes, and if I make them, I'm not going to judge myself. I embrace my mistakes and reset my ambitions. My goal is not to achieve perfection. My goal is only to make a tiny progress in the next 30 to 60 minutes. Supply under GST, page number 31. Stock transfers or branch transfers qualify as supply. It is a common practice in business to transfer goods from different units of entity. For instance, distribution of samples manufactured in a factory to different branches, or transfer of goods from factory to depot showroom for sale therefrom, from one warehouse to another warehouse, from one branch to another branch where the demand of the goods is higher. Since the transfer is within the same business, the transferor unit would not charge any amount to the transferee unit. Similarly, it is also possible that one branch supplies services to another branch of the same entity without consideration. These transactions are termed as self-supplies. Under GST, these transactions, though undertaken without consideration, will also qualify as supply, provided the transfer of goods or services is between different locations with the separate GST registrations of same legal entity, as these transactions are between distinct persons or establishments of distinct persons. Raghubir Fabrics transfers 1,000 shirts from his factory located in Lucknow to his retail showroom in Delhi so that the same can be sold from there. The factory and the retail showroom of Raghubir Fabrics are registered in the states where they are located. Although no consideration is charged, supply of goods from factory to retail showroom constitutes supply. So because it is located in two different premises, two different states, there would have been two different registrations. Therefore, it will be deemed as supply. However, transfer between two units of a legal entity under single registration apparently within same state will not be considered as supply. This can be understood with the help of the following example. Raghubir Fabrics transfers 1,000 shirts from his factory located in Lucknow to his retail showroom in Kanpur so that the same can be sold from there. It has taken one registration in the state of Uttar Pradesh, declaring Lucknow factory as its principal place of business and Kanpur showroom as its additional place of business. Since no consideration is charged, supply of goods from factory to retail showroom in the same state under single registration does not constitute supply. So the key indicator is whether the establishments have same PAN. If it is yes, whether same registrations have obtained for two places of business. If it is no, if there are two different registrations, whether the transfer between them is considered as GST. Yes. So first thing is, if it is interstate supply, then yes, definitely they will be deemed supply. If it is within the same state, then you have to see whether those two entities were of different registrations or of on the same registration. If they have a different registration number, then they will be treated as distinct persons. Therefore, the transactions between them will be deemed supply only. But if the entities is the same, but the establishments are two separate establishments, but they are registered under single GST registration, then no, they are not distinct persons, and there is no deemed supply. Supply of goods or services or both between an employer and an employee. In terms of definition of related person given above, employer and employee are related persons. However, services provided by an employee to the employer in the course of or in relation to his employment or outside the scope of GST treated as neither supply of goods nor as supply of services. Okay, gifts by employer to employee. Further, proviso to para 2 of schedule 1 provides that gifts up to 50,000 in value in a financial year by an employer to an employee shall not be treated as supply of goods or services or both. However, gifts of value more than 50,000 made without consideration are supply and are subject to GST when made in course or furtherance of business. The term gift has not been defined in the GST law. In common parlance, gift is made without consideration, is voluntary in nature, and is made occasionally. It cannot be demanded as a matter of right by the employee, and the employee cannot move to a court of law for obtaining the gift. Perquisites by employer to employee. Since services by an employee to the employer in the course of or in relation to his employment are outside the scope of GST, supply by the employer to the employee in terms of contractual agreement entered into between employer and employee will not be subjected to GST. Any perquisites provided by the employer to its employees in terms of contractual agreement entered into between the employer and the employee or in view of the services provided by the employee to the employer in relation to its employment. It follows therefrom that perquisites provided by the employer to the employee in terms of contractual agreement entered into between the employer and employee will not be subject to GST. Further, input tax credit scheme under GST does not allow ITC of membership of a club, health, fitness center. It follows therefore that if such services are provided free of charge to all employees by the employer, then the same will not be subject to GST. The same would hold true for free housing to the employees when the same is provided in terms of the contract between the employer and employee and is part and parcel to the parcel of the cost to the company. Principal agent. Supply of goods by a principal to his agent without consideration, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal is considered as supply. Similarly, supply of goods by an agent to his principal without consideration, where the agent undertakes to receive such goods on behalf of the principal is considered as supply. Points which merit consideration in this regard are as follows. Only supply of goods and not supply of services is covered here. Supply of goods between principal and agent without consideration is also a supply. Thus, the supply of services between the principal and the agent and vice versa would require consideration to be present so as to be considered as supply and thus making it liable to GST. In order to determine whether a particular principal-agent relationship falls within the ambit of the para 3 of schedule 1 as discussed above or not, the deciding factor is whether the invoice for the further supply of goods on behalf of the principal is being issued by the agent or not. In other words, the crucial point is whether or not the agent has the authority to pass or receive the title of the goods on behalf of the principal. Whether the invoice for further supply of goods on behalf of the principal is being issued by the agent or not. In other words, crucial point is whether or not the agent has the authority to pass or receive the title of the goods on behalf of the principal. Where the invoice for further supply is being issued by the agent in his name, then any provision of goods from the principal to the agent would fall within the fold of para 3 of schedule 1. However, where the invoice is issued by the agent to the customer in the name of principal, such agent shall not fall within the ambit of para 3 above. Similarly, where the goods being procured by the agent on behalf of the principal, or invoiced in the name of the agent, then further provision of the said goods by the agent to principal would be covered under para 3 above. Okay, where the invoice is issued by the agent to customer in the name of principal, then there is no para 3. But if it is issued in the name of agent itself, then it will be covered under para 3. Anmol appoints Bolu to procure certain goods from the market. Bolu identifies various suppliers who can provide the goods as decided by Anmol and asks the supplier to send the goods and to issue the invoice directly to Anmol. In this scenario, Bolu is only acting as the procurement agent and has in no way involved himself in the supply or receipt of goods. Hence, in accordance with the provisions of this act, Bolu is not an agent of Anmol for supply of goods in terms of para 3 of schedule 1. Money Bank, a banking company, appoints Mandar to auction certain goods. The auctioneer arranges for the auction and identifies the potential bidders. The highest bid is accepted and the goods are sold to the highest bidder by Money Bank. The invoice for the supply of the goods is issued by Money Bank to the successful bidder. In this scenario, the auctioneer is merely providing the auctioneering services with no role played in the supply of the goods. Even in this scenario, Mandar is not an agent of Money Bank for the supply of goods in terms of para 3 of schedule 1. Gautam, an artist, appoints Gambhir, an auctioneer, to auction his painting. Gambhir arranges for the auction and identifies the potential bidders. The highest bid is accepted and the painting is sold to the highest bidder. Invoice for the supply of the painting is issued by Gambhir on behalf of Gautam but in his own name, and the painting is delivered to the successful bidder. In this scenario, Gambhir is not merely providing auctioneering services but is also supplying the painting on behalf of. In this scenario, Gambhir is not merely providing auctioneering services but is also supplying the painting on behalf of Gautam to the bidder and has the authority to transfer the title of the painting on behalf of Gautam. This scenario is covered under para 3 of schedule 1. A C&F agent or commission agent takes possession of the goods from the principal and issues the invoice in his own name. In such cases, the C&F commission agent is an agent of the principal for the supply of goods in terms of para 3 of schedule 1. The disclosure or non-disclosure of the name of the principal is immaterial in such situations. Ravi sells agricultural produce by utilizing the services of Kavi, who is a commission agent, as per the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee Act of the state. Kavi identifies the buyers and sells the agricultural produce on behalf of Ravi, for which he charges a commission from Ravi. As per the APMC Act, the commission agent is a person who buys or sells the agricultural produce on behalf of his principal or facilitates buying and selling of agricultural produce on behalf of his principal and receives by way of remuneration a commission or percentage upon the amount involved in such transaction. In case where the invoice is issued by Kavi to the buyer, then he is an agent covered under para 3 of schedule 1. However, in case where the invoice is issued directly by Ravi to the buyer, the commission agent doesn't fall under the category of agent covered under para 3. Clarification of issues pertaining to del creder agent. A question was posed by the industry whether supply between a principal and a del creder agent would also get covered under schedule 1. The government clarified the doubt of the industry by way of the following clarification. Before going through the clarification, let us first understand what is meant by a DCA. In commercial trade parlance, a DCA is a selling agent who is engaged by a principal to assist in supply of goods or services by contacting potential buyers on behalf of the principal. The factor that differentiates a DCA from other agents is that the DCA guarantees the payment to the supplier. In such scenarios where the buyer fails to make payment to the principal by the due date, DCA makes the payment to the principal on behalf of the buyer, effectively providing an insurance against default by the buyer. And for this reason, the commission paid to the DCA may be relatively higher than that paid to a normal agent. In order to guarantee timely payment to the supplier, the DCA can resort to various methods, including extending short term transaction based loans to the buyer or paying the supplier himself and recovering the amount from the buyer with some interest at a later date. This loan is to be repaid by the buyer along with an interest to the DCA at a rate mutually agreed between DCA and the buyer. Issue clarification: whether a DCA falls under the ambit of agent under para 3 of schedule 1. As already clarified wide circular number 57, whether or not DCA will fall under the ambit of para 3 depends on the possible scenarios. In case the invoice for supply of goods is issued by the supplier to the customer, either himself or through DCA, then DCA does not fall under the ambit of agent. In case where the invoice for supply of goods is issued by the DCA in his own name, the DCA would fall under the ambit of agent. Whether the short term transaction based temporary loan extended by the DCA to the recipient, for which interest is charged by the DCA, is to be included in the value of goods being supplied by the supplier, whether DCA is not an agent under para 3 of schedule 1, where DCA is not an agent. In such scenario, following activities are taking place: supply of goods from supplier to recipient, supply of agency services from DCA to the supplier or recipient or both, supply of extension of loan services by DCA to the recipient. It is clarified that in cases where the DCA is not an agent under para 3 of schedule 1, the temporary short term transaction based loan being provided by DCA to the buyer is a supply of service by the DCA to the recipient on principal to principal basis, and it is an independent supply. Therefore, the interest being charged by the DCA would not form part of value of supply of goods by the supplier to the recipient. Where DCA is an agent under para 3 of schedule 1 and makes payment to the principal on behalf of the buyer and charges interest to the buyer for delayed payment along with the value of goods being supplied, whether the interest will form part of value of supply of goods also or not. Supply of goods by supplier to the DCA, further supply of goods by DCA to the recipient, and then supply of agency services by the DCA to the supplier or the recipient or both. Extension of credit by DCA to the recipient. It is clarified that in cases where the DCA is an agent under para 3 of schedule 1, the temporary short term transaction based credit being provided by DCA to the buyer no longer retains its character of an independent supply and it's subsumed in the value of supply of the goods by the DCA to the recipient. It is emphasized that the activity of extension of credit by the DCA to the recipient would not be considered as supply, as it is in the context of the supply of goods made by the DCA to the recipient. It is further clarified that the value of interest charged for such credit would be required to be included in the value of supply of goods by DCA to the recipient as per section 15 subsection 2 clause D. We have concluded our first segment. Let us go to the second segment, charge of GST, page number 3.14. CGST shall be levied on all intrastate supplies of goods or services or both. The tax shall be collected in such manner as may be prescribed and shall be paid by the taxable person. However, intrastate supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption is outside the purview of GST. Transaction value under section 15 of the CGST Act will be the value for levy. Rates will be whatever the rates that are notified by the government on the recommendations of GST Council. maximum rate of CGST can be 20%. In case of interstate supplies of goods or services, IGST is levied on transaction value under Section 15 of CGST Act. Since the alcoholic liquor for human consumption is outside the purview of GST law, IGST is also levied on the same. IGST is the sum total of CGST and SGST or UTGST. Maximum rate of IGST can be 40%. However, CGST and IGST on supply of the following items has not been yet levied. It shall be levied with effect from such date as may be notified by the government on the recommendations of the Council. Petroleum crude, high-speed diesel, motor spirit commonly known as petrol, natural gas and aviation turbine fuel. Tax payable on supply of goods or services or both under reverse charge. CGST or IGST shall be paid by the recipient of goods or services or both on reverse charge basis in the following cases: supply of such goods or services or both as notified by the government on the recommendations of the Council; supply of specified categories of goods or services or both by an unregistered supplier to specified class of registered persons as notified by the government on recommendations of GST Council. All the provisions of the CGST or IGST Act shall apply to the recipient in the aforesaid cases as if he is the person liable for paying the tax in relation to the supply of such goods or services or both. Let us first understand the concept of reverse charge mechanism. Generally, the supplier of goods or services is liable to pay GST. However, under the reverse charge mechanism, the liability to pay GST is cast on the recipient of the goods or services. Reverse charge means the liability to pay tax is on the recipient of supply of goods or services instead of the supplier of such goods or services in respect of notified categories of supply. 2 Clause 98. It may be noted that the underlying principle of an indirect tax is that burden of tax has to be ultimately passed on to the recipient. GST being an indirect tax, this principle holds good for GST. Under normal circumstances, the statutory liability to deposit GST and undertake compliances is on the supplier, while he may recover the same from its recipient. However, under reverse charge mechanism, the statutory liability to deposit GST and undertaking compliance requirement shifts from supplier to recipient. There are two types of reverse charge scenarios provided in law. First scenario occurs in case of supply of specified categories of goods or services covered by Section 9 subsection 3. Second scenario occurs in case of supply of specified categories of goods or services made by an unregistered supplier to specified class of registered recipients. Goods and services notified under this case have been discussed subsequently in this chapter. Goods and services notified under reverse charge mechanism under Section 9 subsection 3 of CGST and 5 subsection 3 of IGST. Supplies of goods taxable under reverse charge, that is, supply of goods where tax is payable by the recipient. Goods like cashew nuts, BD wrapper leaves, tobacco leaves, and raw cotton when supplied by an agriculturist to any registered person. Supply of lottery, whether when supplied by state government, union territory, or any local authority to lottery distributor or selling agent. Silk yarn, when supplied by manufacturer of silk yarn to any registered person. Used vehicles, seized and confiscated goods, old and used goods, waste and scrap, when supplied by central government, state government, union territory, or any local authority to any registered person. Priority sector lending certificate, when supplied by registered person to any registered person, etc., or taxable under supply of services by a GTA in respect of transportation of goods by road to any factory, any society, any cooperative society, any person registered under the GST law, any body corporate, any partnership firm, and any casual taxable person. However, reverse charge mechanism RCM shall not apply to services provided by GTA by way of transport of goods in a goods carriage by road to a department or establishment of the central government, state government, or union territory, or local authority, or governmental agencies, which has taken registration under the CGST Act only for the purpose of deducting tax under Section 51 and not for making a taxable supply of goods or services. Let's go to the third segment of today's study session, page number 56 to 59. Taxpayer Tolaram is a manufacturer who has opted for composition levy under section 10 subsection 1, having a unit in A1, unit A1 in UP and another unit A2 in MP. Total turnover of the two units in preceding financial year was 1 crore 15 lakhs, 85 lakhs and 30 lakhs. Turnover of units A1 and A2 in the first quarter of current financial year is 5 lakhs and 10 lakhs respectively. Compute the amount payable under composition levy under section 10 1 and 10 subsection 2 by Tolaram. So the previous year turnover is 85 lakh and 30 lakh, 1 lakh 50,000, which is less than 1 crore, 1.5 crores. Therefore, he is eligible for composition scheme in the current year. In the current year, he has made turnover of 5 lakhs and 10 lakhs. So the tax is 1% because he is a manufacturer. Next, taxpayer Bolaram is a trader who has opted for composition scheme levy. Taxpayer Bolaram is a trader who has opted for composition levy under section 10 subsection 1 of both taxable and exempted goods exempted by way of a notification. It has one retail showroom A1 in Punjab and another retail showroom A2 in Rajasthan, both selling taxable as well as exempted goods. Total turnover of the two showrooms in the last financial year was 1 crore 15 lakhs, 85 plus 30 lakhs. Turnover of showrooms A1 and A2 in the first quarter of current financial year is 35 lakhs, from which 15 lakhs A1 is 15 lakhs, 5 lakhs from sale of taxable goods and 10 lakhs from sale of exempted goods. A2 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs from sale of taxable goods and 10 lakhs from sale of exempt goods. Compute the amount payable under composition scheme levy by under section 10 subsection 1, 10 subsection 2 by Bolaram. Retail showroom turnover in previous year 85 lakhs. Taxable turnover in first quarter of this financial year is 5 lakhs. So total, even though if it is 15 lakhs, taxable value of goods is sold is 5 lakhs only. Therefore, the 10 lakhs is to be not brought into computation. Okay. And then 30 lakhs you have taxable turnover. For computing the total aggregate turnover, we have to include both exempted and taxable goods. But for computing the actual tax GST, we have to remove the exempted quota. Okay. 10 lakhs and 15 lakhs. Okay. Total tax 5,000, 10,000 and 15,000. A supplier other than manufacturer and restaurant service provider eligible for composition levy under section 10 subsection 1 or 2 has to pay tax at 1% of the turnover of only taxable supplies of goods and services in the state. Now, rates of tax in case of composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a. A registered person opting for composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a shall pay tax at the rate 3%, effective rate 6% of the turnover of supplies of goods and services in the state or union territory. Illustration 3. Taxpayer Padmavati is a saloon stylist who has opted for composition levy under section 10 subsection 2a, having one branch B1 in Vasant Kunj, Delhi and another branch B2 in Gurgaon, Haryana. Total turnover of the two branches in the last financial year was 45 lakhs, 25 plus 20. The turnover of branches of B1 and B2 in the first quarter of the current financial year is 5 lakhs and 10 lakhs. Compute the tax payable. So first you have to check for eligibility 25 lakhs and 20 lakhs. So this is 45 lakhs, which is well within 50 lakhs limit. Therefore, turnover in first quarter of this financial year is 5 lakh and 10 lakh, put 6% of that, you get 90,000. As seen above, since the tax under composition scheme has to be computed as a specified percentage of the turnover in state or turnover in union territory, it is relevant to understand what is turnover in state and union territory. As read as per section 2 clause 112, turnover in state or union territory in means the aggregate value of all taxable supplies excluding value of inward supply on which tax is payable by a person on reverse charge basis, and exempt supplies made within a state or union territories by a taxable person, export of goods or services or both, and interstate supplies of goods or services or both made from the state or union territory by the said taxable person but excludes central tax, state tax and union territory tax, integrated tax and cess. Further explanation 2 to section 10 clarifies that for the purposes of determining the tax payable by a person under this section, the expression turnover in state or turnover in union territory shall not include the value of the following supplies, namely supplies from April 1st of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable for registration under this act, and exempt supply of services provided by way of extending deposits, loans and or advances insofar as the consideration is represented by way of interest or discount. On combined reading of the aforesaid provisions, the method of computing the turnover in a state or union territory for paying tax under the composition scheme can be depicted in a diagram on the next page. Turnover in a state or union territory: all taxable supplies and exempt supplies made within the state or union territory, and it excludes CGST and all the taxes, value of inward supplies on which tax is payable under reverse charge, value of supplies from the first day of April of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable to registration under this act, value of exempt supply of services in the name of loans and deposits. A photographer Champak has commenced providing photography services in Delhi from April this year. His turnover for various quarters till December is as follows: April to June 20 lakhs, July to September 30 lakhs, October to December 20 lakhs. In the given case, since Champak has started the supply of services in the current financial year, his aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year is nil. Consequently, in the current financial year, he is eligible for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a. He becomes eligible for registration when his aggregate turnover exceeds 20 lakhs. While registering under GST, he opts for composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a. For determining his turnover of the state for payment of tax under composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a, turnover of April to June quarter 20 lakhs shall be excluded, as the value of supplies from the first day of April of a financial year up to the date when such person becomes liable for registration under this act are to be excluded for this purpose. On the next 30 lakhs, he shall pay 6% CGST, that is 90,000, and SGST 90,000. By the end of July-September quarter, his aggregate turnover reaches 50 lakhs. Consequently, his option to avail composition scheme under section 10 subsection 2a shall lapse by the end of July to September quarter, and thereafter he is required to pay tax at the normal rate of 18%. Thus, the tax payable for October to December quarter is 3,60,000. Okay, so on that note, we will conclude this segment, which is over. Now let us talk about round 2 of whatever we read yesterday. Place of supply. Location of supplier of services means where a supply is made from a place of business for which registration has been obtained, the location of such place of business. Where a supply is made from a place other than the place of business for which registration has been obtained, that is to say, a fixed establishment elsewhere, the location of such fixed establishment. Where a supply is made from more than one establishment, whether the place of business or fixed establishment, the location of the establishment most directly concerned with the provision of supply, and in absence of such places, the location of the usual place of residence of the supplier. Section 2, Clause 15. The above definition relates only to services. The term location of supplier of goods has not been defined in the Act. As already pointed out that location of supplier of goods is not defined in the law, only the location of supplier of services is defined. Services, being intangible sometimes, leave no trail as to the location from where they are supplied, and for that reason a specific definition is required. Whereas in case of goods, it is easier to determine as to where the goods are actually located. Taking a cue from the definition of the place of supply defined below, the location of supplier of goods is where business is ordinarily carried on or where the goods themselves are located. Place of business includes a place from where the business is ordinarily carried on and includes a warehouse, a godown, or any other place where a taxable person stores his goods, supplies, or receives goods or services, or both, or a place where a taxable person maintains his books of account, or a place where a taxable person is engaged in business through an agent by whatever name called. This is an inclusive definition and is applicable for both goods and services. Supply shall have the same meaning as assigned to it in Section 7 of the CGST Act, Section 2, Clause 21. Recipient of supply of goods or services or both means where a consideration is payable for the supply of goods or services or both, the person who is liable to pay that consideration. Where no consideration is payable for the supply of goods, the person to whom the goods are delivered or made available, or to whom possession or use of the goods is given or made available. And where no consideration is payable for the supply of a service, the person to whom the service is rendered, and any reference to a person to whom a supply is made shall be construed as a reference to the recipient of the supply and shall include an agent acting as such on behalf of the recipient in relation to the goods or services or both supplied. Supplier in relation to any goods or services or both shall mean the person supplying the said goods or services or both, and shall include an agent acting as such on behalf of the supplier in relation to the goods or services or both supplied. However, a person who organizes or arranges directly or indirectly supply of specified actionable claims, including a person who owns, operates, or manages digital or electronic platform for such supply, shall be deemed to be a supplier of such actionable claims, whether such actionable claims are supplied by him or through him, and whether consideration in money or money's worth, including virtual digital assets, for supply of such actionable claims is paid or conveyed to him or through him or placed at his disposal in any manner, and all the provisions of this Act shall apply to such supplier of specified actionable claims as if he is the supplier liable to pay the tax in relation to the supply of such actionable claims. Words and expressions used and not defined in the IGST Act but defined in the After Supplies CGST Act, the UTGST Act, and the GST Compensations to States Act shall have the same meanings as assigned to them in those acts. 2 Clause 24. Place of supply of goods other than supply of goods imported into or exported from India. The place of supply of goods 10 subsection 1. The place of supply of goods other than goods imported into or exported from India shall be as under. Where the supply involves movement of goods, whether the supplier or the recipient or by any other person, the place of supply of such goods shall be the location of the goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. Where the goods are delivered by the supplier to a recipient or any other person on the direction of a third person, whether acting as an agent or otherwise, before or during movement of goods, either by way of transfer of documents of title to the goods or otherwise, it shall be deemed that the said third person has received the goods, and the place of supply of such goods shall be the principal place of business of such person. Where the supply does not involve movement of goods, whether by the supplier or the recipient, the place of supply shall be the location of such goods at the time of the delivery to the recipient. Where the supply of goods is made to a person other than a registered person, the place of supply shall, notwithstanding anything contrary contained in clause A or clause C, be the location as the address of the said person recorded in the invoice issued in respect of the said supply, and the location of the supplier where the address of the said person is not recorded in the invoice. Explanation: for the purposes of this clause, recording of the name of the state of the said person in the invoice shall be deemed to be the recording of the address of the said person. Where the goods are assembled or installed at site, the place of supply shall be the place of such installation or assembly. Where the goods are supplied on board a conveyance, including a vessel, an aircraft, a train, or a motor vehicle, the place of supply shall be the location at which such goods are taken on board. Where the place of supply of goods cannot be determined, the place of supply shall be determined in such manner as may be prescribed. Okay. Section 10 prescribes the provisions for determining the place of supply of goods in domestic transactions, that is within India. Subsection 1 of Section 10 sets out 5 rules to provide the place of supply of goods in the following specific situations. Each of the above situation is discussed below. For residual cases, subsection 2 of Section 10 provides that where the place of supply of goods cannot be determined, the government may prescribe the manner to ascertain the same. It must be kept in mind that the provisions of Section 10 discussed hereunder are all in relation to domestic supply of goods. Supply involving movement of goods. 10 subsection 1 clause A. In case of supply involving movement of goods, the place of supply is the location of the goods at the time when the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. The location of the goods is a question of fact to be ascertained by observing the journey that the goods so supplied make from their origin to termination. This movement, however, can be undertaken by the supplier or recipient or even any other person after having disclosed the destination of the movement of goods. It is important to understand that this provision does not apply in cases where there is no movement of goods, and also the provision does not link itself to transfer of property in goods but to the movement of the goods. Babban Private Limited of Nashik, Maharashtra sells 10 refrigerators to Chaggan Private Limited of Pune, Maharashtra for delivery at the place of business of Chaggan Private Limited. The place of supply is Pune in Maharashtra. Supply involving movement of goods, where goods are delivered to recipient on the instruction of third person, bill to ship to supply. Clause B of Section 10 subsection 1 lays down the provisions to determine the place of supply in cases where there is tripartite arrangement of supply, commonly known as bill to ship to transactions, or where there is a sale of goods in transit by the original buyer or agents. As per the Section 10 subsection 1 clause B, if the goods are delivered to a recipient or any other person by the supplier on the instructions of a third person who may be acting as an agent or on his own account before or during movement of goods, but not after the movement terminates, whether or not there is a transfer of documents of title to the goods, it is deemed that the third person has received the goods, and the place of supply is the principal place of business of such third person. In simple words, where goods are delivered by the supplier to the recipient at the instruction of a third person, the place of supply is the principal place of such third person and not of the actual recipient. It is important to identify the two supplies involved in this transaction. one supply is by the supplier to third person and the second supply is by third person to recipient. This provision deals only with the first limb of supply, that is supply by supplier to third person. Second limb of supply, that is supply by third person to the recipient, will be governed by the provisions of section 10 subsection 1 clause A, that is the place of supply will be the location of the goods at the time when the goods terminates, at the time when the movement of the goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. Even though section 2 clause 93 of CGST defines recipient inter alia as the payer of the consideration, in this provision recipient is the one who actually collects the goods and the third person is the one who enjoys privity with the supplier to be able to direct him to deliver the goods and also usually makes payment to the supplier. So there are two supplies in this transaction. Supplier A is the person who is actually sending the goods. Third person is the one who is actually directing, and recipient is receiving the goods in Delhi. So here the actual movement of goods is there. Supplier A to recipient C. This is one supply, which is the movement of goods. And here the invoice is the two supplies are, the invoice will be sent by A to B. B is the one who would have actually made the payment to A. Therefore, between the supplies between them, because B is the one who has made the order to make A deliver to C, here the place of supply will be location of B. However, these two will have a supply because now goods are received by A. He will send an invoice to C and C will make payment to B. So in this case, for this supply, location of goods at the time when the movement of goods terminates. So here goods are finally deposited in the place of C. So it's where the delivery is terminated. So place of supply is the place of recipient C. Okay, supply not involving movement of goods. Section 10 subsection 1 clause C. So we have read till here till yesterday. So from now we will be reading our fresh quota of pages. Supply not involving movement of goods. Section 10 subsection 1 clause C. If the supply does not involve movement of goods, the place of supply is the location of goods at the time of delivery to the recipient. Newton Private Limited, Delhi has leased its machine costing 8 lakhs to Gravity Private Limited for production of goods on a monthly rent of 35,000. After 12 months, Gravity Private Limited requested Newton Private Limited to sell the machine to it for 5 lakhs, which is agreed to by Newton Private Limited. In this case, there will be no movement of goods and the same will be sold on as is, where is basis. Thus, the location of the machine at the time of sale will be the place of supply, which is Noida. Gangadhar Limited opens a new branch office at Gurugram, Haryana. It purchases a building for office from Gajodhar Builders. It also enters into a separate contract with Gajodhar Builders for purchase of pre-installed office furniture and fixtures in the building. Though there will be no GST liability on purchase of building, as sale of building is covered under Schedule 3 of CGST Act, office furniture and furnished fixtures will be liable to GST. Since there is no movement of office furniture and fixtures, the place of supply of such goods is their location at the time of delivery to the recipient, which is Gurugram. Okay, supply of goods to an unregistered person. Section 10 subsection 1 clause CA, where the supply of goods is made to a person other than a registered person, the place of supply shall be the location as per the address of the said person recorded in the invoice issued in respect of the said supply, and the location of the supplier where the address of the said person is not recorded in the invoice. For the purpose of this clause, recording of the name of the state of the said person in the invoice shall be deemed to be the recording of the address of the said person. Thus, place of supply in case of sales to unregistered person is as follows. When the address of the unregistered person is recorded in the invoice, then place of supply is location as per address of unregistered person. Okay, will be the address of unregistered person recorded in the invoice. Where the address of the unregistered person is not recorded in the invoice, place of supply is the location of the supplier. Simply mentioning the state of unregistered person instead of complete address would be sufficient. There are cases where an unregistered person purchases goods over the counter in one state and thereafter transports the goods to another state, generally where the state where he resides. For instance, migrant workers, tourists, etc., who come to a state for work, tourism, etc., purchase goods in that state to take it to their respective state. Similarly, in automobile sector, the resident of a state may travel to another state to purchase vehicle from that state to take advantage of lower registration charges and road tax, which vary from state to state, and thereafter take the vehicle to their state. In such cases, place of supply will be determined as per above mentioned provision. Place of supply of goods, particularly being supplied through e-commerce platform to unregistered persons where billing address is different from the address of delivery of goods. Issue: Mr. A, unregistered person located in X state, places an order on an e-commerce platform for supply of a mobile phone which is to be delivered at an address located in Y state. Mr. A, while placing the order on the e-commerce platform, provides the billing address located in X state. In such scenario, what would be the place of supply of the said supply of mobile phone? Whether the state pertaining to the billing address or state pertaining to the shipping address. Clarification: as per provisions of section 10 subsection 1 clause CA discussed above, the place of supply of goods shall be the address of delivery of goods recorded on the invoice. Address of delivery of goods recorded on the invoice, that is state Y in the present case where the delivery address is located. Also, in such cases involving supply of goods to an unregistered person where the billing address and delivery address are different, supplier may record the delivery address as the address of the recipient on the invoice for the purpose of determination of place of supply of the said supply of goods. Supply involving installation or assembly of goods. 10 subsection 1 clause D. If the supply involves goods which are to be installed or assembled at site, the place of supply is the place where such installation or assembly. This is a case of composite supply of goods wherein two supplies are involved: supply of goods and ancillary supply of installation and assembling service. Principal supply is supply of goods which are being installed. Gum Private Limited purchases a machine from Doom Private Limited for being installed in its factory at Noida, Uttar Pradesh. The place of supply is the site at which the machine is installed, that is Noida. Pure Refineries gives a contract to Mowgli Limited to supply a machine which is required to be assembled in a power plant in its refinery located in Kutch, Gujarat. The place of supply is the assembly of machine, that is Kutch, even though Pure Refineries is located in Maharashtra. Okay, goods supplied on board a conveyance. Section 10 subsection 1 clause E. When goods are supplied during journey on board a conveyance, it becomes difficult to determine the place of supply of goods, whether it is the location from where the journey originates or where it is the destination, or whether it is the destination or whether it is any of the locations covered by the conveyance during the journey. Therefore, section 10 subsection 1 clause E specifically provides for a determination of place of supply of goods supplied on board a conveyance. Example of goods supplied on board a conveyance can be books and miscellaneous items supplied by the hawkers in train, etc. 10 subsection 1 clause E lays down that place of supply of goods supplied on board a conveyance like aircraft, train, vessel, motor vehicle is the location where such goods have been taken on board. Place of supply of goods supplied on board a conveyance is determined under this provision even if the supply has been made by any of the passenger on board the conveyance and not by the carrier of the conveyance. Maurya Delhi boards the New Delhi Kota train at New Delhi. He sells goods taken on board by him in the train at Jaipur during the journey. The place of supply of goods is the location at which goods are taken on board the conveyance, New Delhi, and not Jaipur where they have been actually sold. Now we have completed the place of supply provisions regarding goods. Now let us talk about place of supply provisions regarding services. Place of supply of services, section 12, subsection 1. The provisions of this section shall apply to determine the place of supply of services where the location of supplier of services and the location of recipient of services is in India. The place of supply of services except the services specified in subsection 3 to 14 made to a registered person shall be the location of such person. Made to any person other than registered person shall be the location of the recipient where the address on record exists and the location of the supplier of services in other cases. The place of supply of services A 3 clause A directly in relation to an immovable property including services provided by architects, interior decorators, surveyors, engineers and other related experts or estate agents, any service provided by way of grant of rights to use immovable property etc. for carrying out or coordination of construction work or by way of lodging accommodation by a hotel, inn, guest house, homestay, club or campsite by whatever name called and including a house, boat or any other vessel etc. or by way of accommodation in any immovable property for organizing any marriage or reception or matters related thereto, official, social, cultural or religious or business function including services provided in relation to such function at such property or any services ancillary to the services referred to in clause A, B and C shall be the location at which the immovable property or boat or vessel as the case may be is located or intended to be located, provided that if the location of the immovable property or boat or vessel is located or intended to be located is outside India, the place of supply shall be the location of the recipient. Explanation: where the immovable property or boat or vessel is located in more than one state or union territory, the supply of services shall be treated as made in each of the respective states or union territories in proportion to the value of services separately collected or determined in terms of the contract or agreement entered into in this regard, or in the absence of such contract or agreement, on such other basis as may be prescribed. Place of supply of restaurant and catering services, personal grooming, fitness, beauty treatment, health service including cosmetic and plastic surgery shall be at the location where the services are actually performed. Okay. Place of supply of services in relation to training and performance appraisal to a registered person shall be the location of such person. A person other than a registered person shall be the location where the services are actually performed. Place of supply of services provided by way of admission to a cultural, artistic, sporting, scientific, educational, entertainment event or amusement park or any other place where place and services ancillary thereto shall be the place where the event is actually held or where the park or such other place is located. The place of supply of services provided by way of organization of a cultural, artistic, sporting, scientific, educational or entertainment event including supply of services in relation to a conference, fair, exhibition, celebration or similar events or services ancillary to organization of any of the events or services referred to in clause A or assigning of sponsorship to such events to a registered person shall be the location of such person. To a person other than a registered person shall be the place where the event is actually held And if the event is outside India, the place of supply shall be the location of the recipient. Explanation: where the event is held in more than one state or union territory and a consolidated amount is charged for supply of services relating to such event, the place of supply of such services shall be taken as being in each of the respective states or union territories in proportion to the value of services separately collected or determined in terms of the contract or agreement entered into in this regard, or in the absence of such contract or agreement on such other basis as may be prescribed. Subsection 8. Place of supply of services by way of transportation of goods by including by mail or courier to a registered person shall be location of such person. A person other than a registered person shall be the location at which such goods are handed over for their transportation. A place of supply of passenger transportation service to a registered person shall be location of such person. A person other than a registered person shall be the place where the passenger embarks on the conveyance for a continuous journey, provided that where the right to passage is given for future use and the point of embarkation is not known at the time of issue of right to passage, the place of supply of such service shall be determined in accordance with the provisions of subsection 2. Explanation: for the purposes of this subsection, the return journey shall be treated as a separate journey even if the right to passage for onward and return journey is issued at the same time. Okay, I think we can stop this for today. So we have read till page number 23. So today is 3rd of November. On that note, we have completed all 5 segments that we are supposed to complete. I hope you feel the sense of progress by traveling with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you and bye bye.